What's going on, y'all? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. There's a playtest for the Kineticist in 2nd edition, so yeah, no, I'm gonna dive right the fuck into it. This week on Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, we are playing around with the Universal Gate Kineticist. Also, I know on Twitter, I said I was practicing my metal vocals once again to say these dope fucking Kineticist feat names. Then I got sick this weekend and I have to bust this out really quickly. So you'll get them next week, I promise, and it'll be metal as shit. But till then, like, subscribe, ding the bell, stay caught up on all your stuff. Y'all know what it is. Google Sheets, Patreon, support me practicing metal vocals once again. To be young again. For now, let's dive in. Okie dokie. So the Kineticist is a lot. Always has been. I feel like if it wasn't in 2nd edition, it would be weird, because like the learning curve was definitely there in 1E. And though 2E, objectively easier still. It would taste wrong. You know what I mean? Before we dive into the big mechanics of the build and the things we're going to do and the choices, let us first discuss what it do. As of the playtest, the Kineticist's key ability score is its Constitution. It fuels its spell-like abilities, aka the once per turn magical eruptions of fire or other very egregious metal things. Has 8 hit points per level, but will almost certainly have more because, you know, big fat con. Trained in Perception, Expert in Fort and Reflex, Trained in Nature, and then 3+ Int. They scale up to eventually Master in both unarmed attacks and simple weapons, with light armor. For the subclasses, probably my favorite thing about the 2E Kineticist, if we're honest. I was worried the subclasses would be like Fire, Water, Wind, Metal, Void, so on and so forth. Instead, it's how many of those given elements one can channel from within them. The dedicated gate, for those of you who want to play Zuko or Sub-Zero, picks one element, can only channel that element, but receives 3 first-level impulse feats, which are sort of like the unique talents for elements in 1E at first level. The dual gate, for those of you who want to have one hand to create and one hand to destroy. For those of you who want to be Shoto Todoroki, I suppose. Lets you pick 2 elements, lets you channel either, and gives you 2 first-level impulse feats, one from one and one from the other. Today we are building around the Universal Gate, the one which can channel all 4 elements, the Avatar, indeed, that gets 1 first-level impulse feat at daily preparation. The Kineticist fuels what it does with the 1-action Gather element, which fills one of your hands with a bit of air or water or earth or fire. You can release this, and it's also expended when you use anything with the Overflow trait, which is most of our like big Kineticist spells. You can also attack with it using Elemental Blast, which is super versatile for us, specifically being able to choose from anything from a 1d4 slashing agile weapon with a reach greater than a longbow, or a short-range 1d8 bludgeoning in the form of huck a rock at them, or a 1d6 agile in the form of fire, or sweeping water. This lets us pivot to what we need to for whatever situation we are at hand, and that's what we're building around today. The Elemental Blast also deals strength to damage if you use a melee strike with it. Though it's not an unarmed attack, it buffs the same way. There are a lot of people who are very divided about this, and I think I could definitely see like a 1-action Gather Power or something like that to then add your con as well, or half your con or something like that. Time will tell, I suppose, right? There are several benefits which we receive automatically as we level as well. Adapt Element lets you do the basic Pyro, Hydro, Geo, and Aero Kinesis for free without having to choose it. A lot of times these are just very, very big, flavorful things. But honestly, I think that's why we're playing tabletop role-playing games, is for the flavor, right? Extract Element gives us something that we can use against like fire elementals if we were a pyromancer. Not as worried about that here, because in this build, we'll just pivot. I also really like the adapt terrain ability to like spread fires in a very interesting way. Is that a torch? Oops, now the house is on fire. Is that a fishbowl? Oops, the fishbowl just dumped out on the floor. Be distracted while my friends and I go sneaking around. Eventually, you get the ability to also purify elements, which may never come up at all until suddenly, for some reason, there's a bunch of gunk in the water and you can't breathe, or you're counteracting like a cloud kill, I suppose that would work. Huh, neat. Because this build is so goddamn feat text, and because I think it's really on flavor, today we will be playing a human Suli. The Suli gives us a lot of extra elemental options, which again, just feels super great when we're adding the avatar to the universe where there are beings that travel the various elemental planes, right? Checks out. And the human will give us another bonus feat at level 1. For our background, anything you want that buffs strength and constitution, we had to dip into the optional flaws for this one because Kineticists just feel so goddamn mad to me. We will begin play with a constitution of 18. A lot of the cool stuff we want to do interacts with our class DC, so we want to buff that. A strength of 16, it is what we are attacking and damaging with, and since sometimes indeed we will just flat out be attacking, gotta have that number high. A dexterity of 14 to help us qualify for some things, and also because light armor is all we got. A wisdom of 12, we are the avatar after all, and an intelligence and charisma each, unfortunately of 8. For this build, we will in fact be using the free archetype rule set. You can follow this card right up here if you don't know what that is or are confused as of the why. Yeah, I know this is a playtest, but I really truly feel like free archetype is just the standard in 2nd edition games, so having that available feels right. You know, you want to see what it can do with all of the other things you can add to it. Definitely I would screw around with this if I wasn't playing it, but I think I would still be making a lot of the archetype feat choices that I am, because a lot of them are just really good. Especially so for the subclass that is incredibly flexible. A lot of our free archetype choices are made to help facilitate that. This build feels very modal, and the Kineticist itself, I feel like they play very rotation-based, like a DPS class in your favorite MMORPG, which I think is what the 2nd edition action economy has been feeding to this entire time, so it's a really interesting way to see that play out. Lots of times I feel like we want to do a 2-action something or another with overflow, with a given element channeled. The battlefield changes, we then use our 3rd action to maybe stride while having a weapon out to attack. Weird the Kineticist needs one, but buy yourself a simple weapon, preferably an agile one. Or like, eventually once we get to move alongside these abilities, then channel a new element for your 3rd action to then go into something else. Man, the Kineticist really wants to be hasted. Anyway, around it down to the class feats at level 1, we will take Flexible Blasts. I don't know if this one's gonna last all the way through to the actual printing and Rage of Elements, we'll see. This lets us give any melee elemental blast the finesse trait, and any ranged elemental blast the brutal trait, which allows us to use our strength for the attack roll. Did I mention that the earth blast has the propulsive trait like it's a big fuck off sling? Because it's a big fuck off sling. It helps the build be a little less mad. I'm very here for that. For our bonus feat from being a human, because we're going to be really up close and personal, and I'm a very big fan, no matter what game I'm playing, of buffing out my defenses before my offenses, and because a lot of these, which we'll talk about later for the flex things, can just exist for that day to grab them when we need them, Stone Shield will be our choice from the thing we have forever. Stone Shield for 1 action allows us to raise a floating shield of stone. Huh, who knew? For 1 action, we raise a shield and gain the ability to use the shield block reaction with the Stone Shield. It has a hardness of 6. It also gives us a circumstance bonus to fortitude saves. And our fortitude DC makes a lot of sense. You're channeling the earth within you. That might make you a little more sturdy, you know? Every 2 levels, the hardness of this thing goes up by +2. It's a staple. It's the ring of protection of 2nd edition, except ours is made of rocks, right? Then at level 2, we'll continue earthbending by choosing Tremor. For 2 actions, you strike the earth, a small localized tremor in a 5-foot burst happens within 30 feet of you. Point this very, very well and make sure you aren't hitting your friends who are flanking the target, but you should be able to organize the burst such that it doesn't hit them. Usually. Talk to your friends, make sure they know you're going to do this. It does 2d4 bludgeoning damage on a basic fortitude save. A creature that critically fails this saving throw is knocked prone. Ground in the burst also becomes difficult terrain until the start of your next turn. So if it ends up being like Tremor, hit someone who's chasing you, organize the burst such that they're on the far end of it, they take some damage and maybe fall over, then you back up and it slows them down a little bit, which I think is really cool. You can also use this to knock people prone for at level 2 with our dex of 14. In fact, a rogue dedication. Insert simple weapon that qualifies for sneak attack here. Fire is a valid choice for this, so if for some reason they can't get up from prone, maybe they're stunned too much, or whatever situation exists that prevents it, at level 4, we'll take Sneak Attacker, which then gives us the sneak attack progression. Really, once the Kineticist archetype comes out, I think there's going to be a really cool build that goes around like Thief Rogues, which then archetype into Kineticist to get like a little bit of firebending. Really, honestly, the shell that the Kineticist is feels so broad to play around that I'm really looking forward to Rage of Elements just being like its own like set of rules almost, which is what I like to see in new classes, much more so than I'm gonna full attack, takes bucket of d6, dumps over, now they're dead. Anyway, for our 4th level feat, we're gonna be grabbing from the For our 4th level feat, we'll be channeling our inner air for Soothing Breeze. Not only does this put out non-magical fires, disperse fog and smoke, and blow objects around, which will be helpful more than you think, believe me. It also heals 3d4 hit points, scaling up by 1d4 for every 2. It's not as good as the Cleric, but it is fast when everyone's immune to everyone else's treat wounds, and there's not a roll attached. A little bit of chip healing never hurt anyone. At level 6, we'll take Cycling Blast for 1 action. Lets you either blast then gather an element, or gather an element and then blast. It's your rapid reload, it's your quick draw, it's your make sure you have the thing to do the other thing to help fuel, again, that big rotational thing. Feels very stable, you know? I really wish Strong Arm was worded just a little differently. If it was, we would be taking Strong Arm on the archetype feat side to increase the range of our ranged kinetic blasts, but they're not thrown weapons. Boo for that. Instead, basic trickery for Nimble Dodge at level 6, mostly just to qualify the heck out of Rogue as fast as we can. We've gotten what we needed. We got Sneak Attack. Here is another tool in the toolbox if for some reason we weren't able to Stone Shield, which, thinking about it, not that bad in a world where we might end up somewhere else and then here comes a random arrow at us we weren't expecting. Yeah, it's better than I thought it was. Do it. At level 8, we're going to take even more random healing things. Hydrokineticists in the chat rejoice. Torrent in the Blood. For 2 actions, sends out a 30-foot cone, which heals every creature in the area of 3d6 hit points and lets them attempt a new save against poisons or diseases going on after them. Alongside this, the Fighter dedication. If you could squeeze in, and I guess you still could if you wanted to drop some things, Kinetic Weapon to turn your gathered element into like a javelin or something. Point blank shot looks really interesting, and I'm gonna freely admit in this case, I'm not entirely sure if the ranged strikes that come from a kinetic blast interact with point blank shot. If they do, that's really fucking great. If not, we can still get some value out of this, and I'm still here for it. Moving on to level 10, Gather Amalgamation for 2 actions lets us gather air, earth, fire, and water, but no heart. Sorry, Captain Planet, there's nothing for the positive energy plane going on here. When we do this, when we elemental blast, it will disperse the element, so eventually we'll need to re-up if we need another air or another fire or something. But it makes our action economy a little bit faster if we tremor for 2 actions and then strike a prone target with fire, potentially dealing sneak attack, and alongside this we'll take Opportunist from the Fighter for attack of opportunity, because the bad guys never see it coming when suddenly you pull a lightning bolt out of your inner strength and then stab them with it, you know what I mean? Rapid Reattunement at level 12 will allow us to, for 10 minutes, swap out 1 feat we have due to elemental flexibility, which we gained at level 9 to, in addition to that feat at level 1 that we get, also grant us an elemental impulse feat of 8th level or lower that we don't already have until our next daily prep. So we have 1 at level 1 that ticks on immediately when you wake up, and then a second one also as well that can be switched around. While everyone else is recovering focus points, you're digging between a bunch of stuff we'll talk about at the end of the video, and probably across 2 more Kineticist builds. Yeah, I'm gonna do this 3 times, I think, honestly, because there's just so much shit here. Rather than like, here's an hour and a half deep dive. They feel good enough to get their own thing. Fighter Resiliency comes next on the archetype feat side. Unless point blank shot interacts. Very unsure. Tell me in the comments so I know for later, y'all. As it stands, this is just kind of grab this here, gain some HP. You could maybe also take sudden charge. I just feel like most of our 2-action things are doing something else, and this will at least get us a little bit of something that isn't just nebulously floating in a bank that's already so full of a lot of things to do, such that we just straight up might not ever see it come up, you know? At level 14, man, I really, really wish that this feat was like level 4 or level 6. I guess I get why not, it's really good, but I so want for this concept to be able to take it earlier. Flowing kinetics. This says when you use an impulse that has the air, fire, or water trait that takes at least 2 actions, you can either step or stride up to half your speed. So we can't do this after tremoring, but there are other things that we'll be able to flex into as well that can allow us to reposition. Torrent in the Blood is one of them. You can do this either before or after the other effects, burrowing, climbing, flying, or swimming as well. Actually, you know, I really like that for the healer benders. Move half your speed. Oh wow, now I'm definitely in the cone. I'm gonna use my 2-action thing to heal everybody, and then have that 1 action left to do something else, or just get out of the way of your own big blast if you chose to flex into that. Though it's nowhere near as mechanically good as it was in first edition. Next, the Barbarian dedication. After, you know, we grabbed Moment of Clarity to really lock us in to that Moment of Clarity, hit you with a thing. Or from level 14, when we get Moment of Clarity, sustain a cast around a ghost Stone Guardian, and then hit you with the thing. These are really interesting, and I wasn't expecting to see them, but it supports the party in a really unique and interesting way, therefore I'm here for it. For 2 actions, you call a medium creature with 30 AC, 120 hit points, being immune to crits and precision damage, using your saving throw bonuses, but failing any reflex save automatically, lasting for up to a minute if we sustain it. Once again, which looks real good. Every time the Guardian is sustained, it can make a big attack. More importantly, allies within the Guardian's reach gain cover. They can't use it to hide, but they can use it to pad out their AC. This scales up at +1 level for its attack bonus, strike damage, and AC by 1 and 10 hit points. It's like a spiritual weapon that upsides everyone, and might get attacked by opponents that don't know what it is, because suddenly here's this like terracotta soldier that's appeared out of nowhere, right? On to level 18 next. I really thought I would be taking more of these, and I might on more of the blasty builds as opposed to the big flexing things. I'm sorry everyone, I'm not going to use any of those very over-the-top super cool named feats that exist in this particular build. Please believe those are coming. Sea Glass Guardian. For 2 actions is our first kinetic aura, which for us will eternally be a 10-foot emanation, but whenever a creature in or adjacent to that aura, so anything from 15 feet out from you, damages you or an ally within the aura, they take 8 damage. Which at this level is not a whole hell of a lot, unless they happen to have a weakness to cold, piercing, or slashing, which is kind of the cool part about the Kineticist mode ability. And technically, I suppose it would be 12, because our level has gone up by +3 since the 14 at this point. And will stack up very quickly over time for not a lot of resources used by the player, which I think is really cool. Don't need to sustain it, fire this on, and then let it run until you're knocked out, the encounter ends, or until you can use a new aura. So for the entirety of the fucking thing, that's really cool. For our archetype feat, in fact, it's going to be the Barbarian's Instinct ability. I'm really hoping that when Rage of Elements comes out, there will be an elemental-themed Barbarian. For now, I suggest working with your GM, choosing the Dragon Instinct and reflavoring it something along the lines of like, I respect the hell out of a Freedy, be nice to them, or I'll hurt you. Then add even more damage of a given element to your elemental blasts. Admittedly less with a lot of the agile things we're trying to get up to, but more damage is as more damage does. Mama used to say, put them all together, help the class that's going wide have other things it can grab to keep everything else at least somewhat up there with other master martials. The fighter and the gunslinger are probably gonna outrun you, but like, that's the point of them. That's what they're supposed to do. You're here to fill in any gaps that they might need, and then also be able to exploit the myriad weaknesses in the game and kind of just be really fucking cool. And then at level 20, Omnikinesis. Since we get improved elemental flexibility at level 15, this lets us, for 1 action, replace one of the feats you chose with another eligible feat. Alongside that, Inspired Stratagem is a reaction. If you spent 10 minutes during your daily prep talking to your friends, probably do that. When your ally is making an attack, or skill check, they roll with advantage. Everyone's going to be really happy that you took that. For our ancestry feats, Natural Ambition at level 1 gets us that bonus class feat, then Elemental Assault at level 5, once per day for one action, choosing whatever the hell we've flexed bended into. Until the end of our next turn, our strikes deal an additional 1d6 points of the indicated type of damage, be that bludgeoning, electricity, fire, or cold for earth, air, fire, water, respectively, into Tetra Elemental Assault at level 9, which allows us to cycle through these over the course of like a combat-ish. Bonus points if you can flex all of your individual gates through that for extra value. Continuous Assault will let us do that once per hour instead of once per day. Then at 17th, a feat I haven't looked at a whole heck of a lot because I don't build a lot of humans, turns out, but Bounce Back. A free action once per day when you lose the dying condition. You do not increase the value of the wounded condition. Seems good when people are going to be seeing a bunch of magic and probably shooting at you and shit. And then our general feats, say it with me kids, Toughness and Die Hard, Incredible Initiative, Numb to Death, Candy Acumen for our will save. But now let's get into the really cool shit, shall we? So throughout this character's career, at level 1, we'll get one level 1 impulse feat we can flex into every day. At level 9, we'll add one additional of 8th or lower. At level 12 with the class feat, we can spend 10 minutes to switch those up. Then at 15th, we have in total a 1st level feat, an 8th level feat, and a 14th level feat, which by 20th, using Omnikinesis, we can just snap over for one action. But what do we choose? Well, whatever you need, my friend. Much like a wizard, this build will benefit a lot from planning, from scouting, from knowing what your party can do, and knowing what she will be going up against. You may need more fire versus trolls than you will against red dragons. You may want bludgeoning damage versus skeletons. You may want invisibility or the ability to illusory disguise yourself for stealth missions, which is another thing I super like about this concept. So many times you have people in a game who want to play intriguey, stealthy kinds of things, and then you have Johnny McMarshall face who's gonna sit in the corner and wait till there's something they can make dead. The Kineticist can hang, and I think that's really dope. And all of even the level 1 things, though they don't scale perfect, all of them, scale they indeed do. So the level 1 things feel pretty good even later on if you're choosing them. Flame Eruption, for example, makes a 5 foot in diameter, 30 foot high cylinder that lances up scaling d6s of fire damage and makes hazardous terrain as a geyser of fire snaps into being. But that might not be as useful if you're not fighting in 3D and would rather go tidal hands to make either 2 15-foot cones, double burning hands, but it's bludgeoning, or one big 30-foot cone of Kamehameha wave bludgeoning. What do you mean these creatures are resistant to fire? Shit, okay, I'll pivot, and you're just fine. But so far as the tech things go, I think my favorite and the winner for me, bar none, is Stepping Stones. For 2 actions, you make those big headstones in Elden Ring, essentially, setting them either horizontally to make a path across the ground or across liquid, or anchoring them up the side of a vertical surface to make stairs. The path is 20 feet long. Steps can extend 10 feet up the side of a surface. The squares have to be contiguous. They must be no more than 60 feet away from you. This lets you ignore difficult terrain and hazardous terrain if you need to walk over lava. If you're walking over lava, you have bigger concerns. Much more importantly, I think, if you don't sustain this lasts until the end of your next turn, or you sustain it, off the top of my head, for example, for enough time for everyone in the party to climb into a 2nd story window. No athletics? No problem. Just walk up the staircase that I've made for you, sheer rock surface, snap, some of the rocks come out, and now, as Obi-Wan once said, you can get the high ground. Think how many dungeons exist, because I know that 2nd edition Pathfinder, especially the adventure paths, are often told in a very here is dungeon, here how dungeon go format. You can dodge a lot of the problems of by coming in the 2nd story window, as opposed to the heavily guarded front door. A very stealthy party can use this in the middle of the night to get the drop on people. A very unstealthy party can use this to escape pursuit, set up a line of defense in a room that might not necessarily have shit in it. How deep is that chasm? Like that? Okay, cool. Have your friends run across, then stop sustaining it so pursuers can't quite keep up. This one's cool. Likewise, Water Dance. For 2 actions, target a creature within 30 feet and they may stride up to 30 feet for no action. If they're in the water, they can swim up to 40 feet. They gain a +2 circumstance bonus to reactions triggered by this. If you target yourself, you can then stride a little faster than you would be normally. But this is really cool in a lot of very modal, very movable kinds of encounters. I feel like Water Dance is one I would choose a lot, either to get my archer out of the line of fire or get my fighter at the back of the pack to the front of the pack. Even if striding up to 30 feet is actually secretly just a step to enable the flank without aiding someone's reaction. It falls kind of like those Treant Monk guides did. If you are the one who enabled the kill but the fighter got the kill, who gets the credit, you or them? Whisper on the Wind is amazing long-range tech. You don't need line of effect if you start the message with the target's name, and eventually this goes up to a mile. I might not necessarily want to flex into this one till level 8 when it is a mile, but this is a perfect... What was the name of the NPC that we're working for? Okay, I'm gonna call them and their friends for reinforcements. Snap Whisper on the Wind. Never underestimate the power of a walkie-talkie. Air Cushion is Featherfall. You probably won't take it a lot, but when you really needed it, you really needed it. Our level 9 stuff gets a little more crazy, reaching back into, for example, Clear as Air. For 2 actions, you become invisible and you can sustain that, so if you weren't prepared to do invisible stealth things, but the party's gonna do that, or if it becomes something that the party just straight up can't do but needs, you can flex into that. This eventually turns into greater invisibility type things, letting you attack under it, or, you know, when you really wanted friendly toss but you weren't a barbarian, flinging updraft. Choose a creature within 60 feet of you, they jump up to 30 feet in any direction. If they don't land on a space of solid ground, they fall. Unwilling targets reflex save against your class DC, which makes this super modal. Sometimes you just want to throw somebody up in the air, or off the side of a good god, point the in any direction diagonal and you just fucking team rockets blasting off against somebody. Jesus Christ. Or like when you need to clear a wall, get on a roof, get up the side of a cliff, grab a tree, get someone who's threatened the fuck out of the threat ranges of things, because this is forced movement. Actually, fun fact, no it isn't. This feels like it should be forced movement, but it's not forced movement. So when they jump, this theoretically causes things to provoke from your marshals too. God damn it, that is tight. Also, fly speed sometimes. I feel like in 2nd edition, because the ability to fly is considerably harder to get than in other iterations of the game, this is something to flex into for when you need it. Sometimes truly you can exist on the ground and be just fine, but if you want to fire air blasts down from way the fuck up in the air, or like it's just the airship level, this exists for you. On the Earth front, Kineticist lets you create a permanent stone object. It must be relatively simple, it cannot include any intricate parts, moving pieces, or fine details. It has to fit within a 5-foot cube adjacent to you, and you can't make it large enough to occupy the square. It lasts until you use Kineticist again, then the Earth gently goes back to the plane of Earth or its normal shape. Crafting checks let you add small details to this. This is as good as your creativity. Because you can include fine details, I'm gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna assume you can't make a key with this, but you could make, say, a battering ram or a doorstop or a cup to hold a liquid, or something on the order of like a vase to hold something bigger, or if you imagine like a cube in box shape, just without an opening and closing lid, hollow with a spot on top to load things, you suddenly can carry shit around that you might not have been able to do. Or you can just write Avatar was here on the side of something. Also good. Also good. Swim through Earth grabs you a burrow speed. You can't breathe while doing this, but good news, you have a high con, so you're fine. Never ever underestimate the power of burrowing under a wall or like through a stone wall to get through things. We literally just talked about this when we were building an Oread. Moving in 3D and through dynamic lighting, you can get a lot of mileage out of that. Remember that part where Kineticist doesn't make a key? Well, you might not need it. On the waterfront, Veil of Mists gives you a 2-action illusory disguise. Are you hanging out with a bunch of vigilantes, reflections, illusionists, and other people who look like lots of other people? Shit, I wanted to play a marshal. Okay, there you go. Now you can keep up with them. Alongside this, Return to the Sea, which you will almost never flex into unless you're in an aquatic game or suddenly you're on the water level. The person who can't swim now can and ignores the effects water normally has on bludgeoning and slashing attacks. Oh shit, my friend fell off the boat. Snap your fingers, and they're fine. And that's the glory of having abilities to flex into, right? How many times would we straight up just not take this, but then really regret it when we didn't take it? Or worse, take this and have to retrain out when we're done with the water parts. For the 14th level ones, there are some really interesting ones, but I think none of them beat the most goddamn, well, not the most goddamn metal of them. So many of them are, truly. Arrive in Conflagration. Flex into this, and for 2 actions, you fall through yourself, leave behind an effigy of flame, like this is some kind of anime that has been the whole time, and then reappear somewhere else within 120 feet, as long as it's adjacent to open flame or creature taking persistent fire damage. This is somewhat hard to pull off. It's not a permanent dim door plus. Attack by night. How many torches exist? You leave a pillar of fire behind you, and any creature who starts their turn adjacent to it takes 2d6 fire damage, scaling up with a basic reflex save that lasts until the start of your next turn, but gets you away from shit when you really need it. And again, kind of leans into that we're sneaking by night in a really interesting way, at least in humanoid settlements. For when we're down to big combats, something like solar detonations, 3d10 fire damage that on a success on their save leaves the foes dazzled till the start of your next turn. Failures, they're blinded till the start of your next turn, and critical failures, they take double fire damage and are blinded for a minute, are really interesting go into for Nova strats when it comes down to it. These are less damage than equivalent fireballs and things, but we took 0 effort to get into them, and again, I think that's super fucking cool. So yeah, that's a lot to process. This video is just over an hour long recorded. Man, it's gonna be a bear to edit this. But a really fun and a really interesting bear. I think one of the things I like the most about the Universal Gate is when extra content comes out, when third-party stuff comes out, this only gets better and better the more stuff is released for it, and more stuff will indeed be released, right? You have a lot of things in-house to be a very reliable damage dealer to support the other marshals, and then can flex into other really powerful support tools to and a lot of things parties want to get up to, be able to hang no matter what the other players are trying to make, and can facilitate a lot of stuff that I think just straight up wouldn't be able to happen. That a lot of the time I think just straight up wouldn't be able to happen at a lot of tables, and I think that's really cool. But that is all the time I have for this one. What do y'all think? Tell me about your thoughts down in the comments. I want to build around the other 2 subclasses. I want to dive really hard into Mortal Kombat, basically. Until then, friends, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time.